Hello, welcome back to the Painting with Plotters course. This is Module 1, Video 3. In this video, we're going to continue our discussion about different materials and tools for the plotter painting process. And in the previous one, we talked about different surfaces to paint on. In today's video, let's start by looking at a variety of paint that we can use on those surfaces. Today, we're going to look at 3 categories of paint. First, liquid dye-based paint. Second, liquid pigment-based paint. And third, gel-like paint. Let's start with the first category, dye-based fluid paint. Many inks, especially fountain pen inks, fall into this category. I'd say, so far about 80% of my paintings were made with fountain pen ink. They come with a huge variety of colors. They are vibrant, easily mixable, and has extremely interesting variations that gives different sheens or even contains glitters. Because most fountain pen inks are dye-based, they are ultra smooth. That's why they wouldn't clog your fountain pen, and then they don't need to be stirred during the painting process. The word ink contains a wide range of liquid paint. So you will find things like pigment ink, acrylic ink that actually contains pigment. But if you're using dye-based ink, they are most likely not light-fast. Meaning that if you expose this ink under sunlight for an extended period of time, it will change color. There are, of course, ways to slow down this change. For instance, you can use UV spray or UV glass, but one of the robotic artists that I really admire, Jens Klarholm, did a test with different ink under various conditions, including UV spray, and the result is interesting. It basically shows that nothing really helps. I will link Ian's post in the description if you're interested in checking out more. Despite the poor light fastness, I still think fountain pen ink is a great option, especially if you're getting started. I am obviously very obsessed with archiving and preserving my work, but I think it is very important to enjoy the process and to have fun while you're creating. Okay, let's look at the second category of paint, pigment-based fluid paint. We will look at watercolor, gouache, and liquid acrylic. This group of material contains pigment, which is colorful particles that are insoluble to water. In order to stick those particles to your painting surface, this paint needs to contain a binder, basically a glue. For watercolor and gouache, this glue is normally gum arabic. In order to distribute the pigment evenly in a fluid form, you would need to stir them. This is important to remember if you want to plot with watercolor. Here is a watercolor mixture. When it is well stirred, it produces a rich color. I let this watercolor mixture settle for about 5 minutes. Now, I will take some mixture from the very top of the inkwell. You can see this color is so much lighter in comparison to the previous one. This is because most of the pigment have settled to the very bottom. So, if you want to have an even distribution of the pigment, you would need to constantly stir your paint. Watercolor comes in various formats, the most common ones being the tube and the solid watercolor cubes. I mostly use tube watercolor and I pre-mix them with water. The benefit with this is that you can control the mixture and strength of the color very easily. Of course, you can use solid watercolor cubes directly. My friend Amy Goodchild, who is an amazing generative artist and a writer, has written about her experience and setup for using solid watercolor cubes directly. I will link her blog in the information section. The next category of paint we will briefly discuss is gel-like paint. In this category, we have things like acrylic, gouache, and oil paint. Notice that acrylic and gouache are here again. Many materials can be made into different forms by adjusting water or medium content. Using acrylic as an example, you will be able to find a really wide range of acrylic paint that suits for different needs. When you are working with thicker gel-like material on a plotter, you might need to consider different loading and applying mechanisms. We'll discuss this more in the future module. Regardless of what paint you would pick, the next step is to figure out what kind of containers can you use to hold those paints during the plotting process. My own setup went through several different iterations, but so far I think it has reached a pretty good state. Before I show you those iterations, let's pause a moment and think about what do we need in those paint trays. The top priority is to be able to secure the tray to a fixed location, so your plotters will be able to go to that location. In the previous video, I talked about why everything needs to be fixed, and the plotter arms should be the only thing moving on your table. The first iteration of my setup did exactly that. I had a wooden template secured by tapes. Then I hot glued some plastic cups to the template, serving as the individual inkwells. This setup works except that I need to move the entire tray in order to clean it. Sometimes I also want to rearrange the order of the palette, but because all the inkwells have fixed positions, I can't really move individual ones. And I also say the circular inkwell is not a super efficient use of the space. So now we have our second requirement, being able to arrange and clean individual inkwells. And here comes the second version that does that. It is a metal tray with a collection of mini plastic trays inside. I secure the entire metal tray with tapes. Notice that I have a water tray here. This is a tofu box that I cut into the specific height and used as the cleaning tray. The challenge with this setup is again the tape. In order to wash the tray, I need to constantly take off the tape and tape them back. Because the table I was using at that time had a metal tabletop, one day I decided to switch the tape for magnets, and it worked really well. So that's the inspiration for the third version of my setup using magnets. I would glue those magnets to the bottom of a plastic case. This would be the setup that I recommend to most people. It is easy to make and relatively low cost. It is very easy to move, rearrange, and then to clean individual inkwells. Here is a small tip on gluing the inkwell. I use super glue for this. If you just add the glue directly to the magnet and try to place it, you will find that it is really difficult to add the second and third magnet because the first one will attract or repel them. The best way that I have found so far is to use some magnets as anchors on the bottom. So let's talk about the downside of this approach. First, this magnet can fall off, especially during the washing process, which means you will be spending a lot of time reapplying the glue. I tried several variations of glues, including hot glue, super glue, and resin glue. Everything eventually falls off after several washes. So this approach would require a lot of maintenance. The second issue might not really happen to you, but it did happen to me. Some of the paint that I use has a high iron content. In some cases, you will actually see small metal particles gathering around the magnet, making it really difficult to clean. Because of those issues, I developed the fourth iteration of my setup. I built custom cases for my trays using a 3D printer. I wrote a script to generate cases like this one. It has small holes built in. A magnet can be pushed into those holes and stay there without needing any additional glue. The opening of this case also fits the plastic inkwell perfectly, so that I don't need additional glue or tape. You might ask, why bother putting in those plastic containers? Just use the 3D printed tray directly. There are two reasons. First, to print watertight container with a 3D printer, you would need specific settings. My printer is not always stable enough to print watertight containers. Second, the plastic insert make it much easier to move, rearrange, and clean the inkwells. So far, the fourth iteration has been working really great for me. If you're interested in trying it yourself, the script is again in our GitHub, and I'll make a bonus video that walks you through the process of using this script. So the last major thing you will need in order to make a painting is brush. The brush is really up to your preference, you just give it a try. One thing to keep in mind is that brushes with longer tips will likely store more paint, and this paint might drip while the arm is moving. I use those super tiny brushes. I think it is a size 000. The tip is very short, as you can see in here, and even this is too long for me, so I actually cut it short. You will only be able to hold a tiny amount of water, but you will be able to make more precise lines. Another great thing about this brush is that it is not super expensive. When you're using a brush on a plotter, you might notice that the brush will actually wear out faster than you have imagined. So every couple of paintings, I actually need to replace the brush. Therefore, I don't think it is a really good idea to spend tons of money on buying the brush. Okay, before ending this video, I also want to quickly go over a collection of general studio tools that are really helpful. Great. In this module, we talked about the plotter, we talked about setting up the environment, we talked about all the art supplies and all the studio tools that you would need in order to get started with generative plotter painting. In the next module, we're finally going to get started with the plotting. Thanks so much for joining me, especially for those of you who have been waiting for such a long time so patiently. Using the next few minutes, I'm going to share a little bit more about why I had to pause this course for such a long time. This is completely irrelevant to the course material, but rather a personal story. So feel free to skip it. I will see you in the next video. Earlier this year, I had to pause the production of this course because I basically got really burned out. It was perhaps the worst burnout that I have ever had. 2024 had been a really important year for me in terms of my artistic journey. In 2024, I did my very first in-person solo exhibition in London. And 3 months after that, I presented a participatory design workshop at the Victoria and Albert Museum. It was my very first experience of building a large-scale participatory design workshop. I really poured my whole heart into this event. And after the production of the Painting with Plotters event, I was already a little feeling tired, but instead of giving myself a break, I actually jumped into more exciting adventures. So it was traveling, it was giving talks, it was doing something constantly. And I'd say all of those adventures have been really rewarding and really amazing. I have zero regret doing them. If you give me options to choose again, I would still do them 100% without any regret. But looking back, I should have given myself a little bit more time after all of those adventures. What I did was to start the production of this course, and I even planned for a super ambitious weekly update, which by now I know a video like this definitely takes longer for me as one individual to produce in a week. So you probably can see what went wrong in here. But in 2024, end of 2024, I really didn't see it. So I was working till the very last moment, even through the entire holiday break, I was working. Coming back to January and start working on the course again, I felt very terrible. Not only mentally I felt terrible, physically I'm getting a little impact as well. I started to get sick. So January was very slow, but I was still making the videos. And coming back to London in February, I got sick again. In general, I am very lucky to be a super healthy person. So normally I don't get sick at all, even through the flu season. But as I just mentioned, early this year, I got sick twice in 5 weeks, which was really abnormal for me. And that was a moment when I had to acknowledge that this is not going to work. I would have to give myself longer time to prepare this, and urgently, I need a break. So despite feeling extremely guilty and sad to be not able to follow the production plan, I decided to pause it and take some time for myself. So at the time of the recording of this video, we are about 5 months away from the moment when I decided to take a pause. And I'd say this longer break has been really helpful, and I'm probably 90–95% back into the game. So that's pretty much what happened. I got burned out. I need time to recover, and I'm glad I am back now. I feel very sorry for those of you who were waiting for this course so patiently, and I know many of you have sent me questions, comments, and direct messages. I am very sorry that I'm super behind on this, but I will try to get back to you as soon as possible. For those of you who are worried that I have abandoned the series, don't worry, this is definitely my lifelong passion and my dream project. I give you the promise that I will keep producing this series as soon as I can. But I'm also going to say I have learned the lessons from my earlier burnout, and I never want to experience this level of burnout ever again. So I'm still going to try to keep a regular update for this course, but if I need a break, I will just take it. Thanks for understanding. Well, thank you so much for listening to my stories. Let my story be a gentle reminder that you do need to take breaks, even if what you're working on is something you're passionate about. So with that, thanks so much for being here, and I am so happy to be back. I will see you in the next module.